and welcome to another edition of the Hitting the Hardwood podcast, your home for all the latest Minnesota Lynx and WNBA news, analysis, and coverage. Thank you for tuning into another episode. I'm your host, Mitchell Hansen, and this week I'm thrilled to be joined by Sloane Martin, who is a play-by-play broadcaster, sideline reporter, kind of jack of all trades when it comes to the broadcasting world. You see her, if you're a Lynx fan, you see her all the time on Bally Sports North. If you're a basketball fan in general, you maybe see her on Bally Sports North. You maybe see her on Big Ten Network. You maybe see her on CBS Sports Network. You maybe see her on FS1. Kind of everywhere. And Sloane she does a lot of sideline reporting for Bally Sports North right now. She does some fill and color commentary. She also, does a lot of women's basketball play-by-play for Big Ten Network. And like I said, she's kind of everywhere on social media, on your television, and she does great work with covering the women's game, covering the Lynx, covering the WNBA. And I'm really thrilled to be joined by her this week. We kind of talk a little bit of everything. We talk about the broadcasting world. We talk about the basketball aspect of things with the Lynx. We kind of go a little bit of a deep dive of what it's like to be a broadcaster, the preparation that goes into being a broadcaster, what it's like to be, in the game and in-game, broadcasting and kind of everything that goes into that aspect. And then we transition to, a little bit of the WNBA, where the Lynx are, where they are as a team. As we're recording this podcast, the Lynx are 4-9 going into the new week. They play Seattle this Tuesday at Target Center, and we kind of talk about that. We talk about the transition period, kind of coming out of the dynasty, where Minnesota's at right now, where they're going to be going into the future, and that also leads into a little bit of college basketball talk, the prospects that could be available at the end of the year, into the next year's draft, even into the year prior, or beyond that. That basically the next few drafts are going to be filled with talented college prospects, and there's no better person to talk about it than Sloane, who, like I said, has been covering the WNBA, covering women's basketball. She's very familiar with the players that will be coming in and the players that are in the WNBA right now. So it was great hearing her perspective on the game itself and covering the game. She's been kind of around the game for a while. She started as a journalist, covering the Lynx, and just kind of transitioned into the radio broadcast and TV side of things. So it's been great to obviously see Sloane cover the game. To have her join the talented Bally Sports North crew, alongside Marnie Gallner and Leah B. Olson and company, and they make a very, very solid team. And not only is she solid on the broadcast, but she's a great guest to have on the podcast. And I'm lucky to be able to chat a little bit with her and to dive into all things basketball. So without further ado, let's jump into this week's podcast with the one and only Sloane Martin. Sloane Martin, thank you for joining me. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for the invite.
Yes, I just talked to you a little bit before this podcast or before the recording that I've been trying to get a little bit of a wide variety of guests and kind of the broadcast aspect and in kind of that area of the game I haven't really tapped into a ton yet. So I wanted no better place to start than Bally Sports North and what you provide and you and the rest of the crew provide Lynx fans and Lynx coverage. So I appreciate you joining, and we're going to talk maybe a little broadcast, a little basketball, and kind of everything in between. So thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, I think it's interesting too, because I've kind of worn so many different hats around the team. I've been a journalist, I've been part of the team broadcast, so I've seen it kind of from multiple different angles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Before we get started, would you be able to just kind of introduce where people can find you, where they can find your work? They can find you all over TV. You're doing a little bit of everything, but on social media, wherever it may be.
Oh yeah, here's the whole spiel. Yes, it's at Sloane Martin on Twitter, and that is Sloane. There's an E at the end. And on Instagram, it is _ Sloane Martin. Of course, on Bally Sports North, you can see me on the sideline and also filling in play-by-play and color as well. If you are a women's basketball fan, you should be watching your local regional teams on Big Ten Network, and of course the Gophers as well. You'll hear me there, and the Big Ten tournament as well, CBS Sports Network FS1 as well for women's basketball.
Well, I know I don't just speak for myself. I speak for everybody that it's what the covers that you provide and the kind of the information and everything that you provide, not only on social media, but on when it's game coverage. It's definitely great. So I don't want to sound weird in saying keep it up, but keep it up. It's great. Yeah, I mean that's awesome. So I appreciate everything that you do, and it's cool to follow along. So thank
Hey,
you
we
for
all need to hear that,
yeah,
know?
yeah. I
Appreciate
agree.
it.
I agree. Yeah. Well, let's dive right into things. I kind of just want to, we just kind of talked about what you do for not only women's basketball, but specifically for the Lynx. This year, kind of joining the crew of Libby Olsen and Marnie Gellner in joining Bally Sports North to kind of have a couple different hats that you provide. What I guess overall, what's it been like so far, and what's it like covering this team? It's not your first time covering the team; you've always been around the team. But what's
Yeah.
it like to cover the team this year?
It's really interesting and fun, and it's a much different thing than I'm used to. I had been the radio broadcaster in 2019, so you're used to being around that team that day in, day out, where you know them up and down, where you are preparing for the next game, and you don't even have to update that much because it's all up here in your head because you just know this team up and down, compared to what I normally do throughout much of the year as a national broadcaster, where you are just showing up and here are your teams, and it's going to be new really frequently. I end up through the course of the season seeing every single Big Ten team, all 14, soon to be 16 of them. I started doing Big East games last year as well. And so that was a new introduction for me too. So it was fun to go back to being in that team environment where you are kind of in there with them day in and day out. They know you so well. And, getting to the point where you can say hello at any time, there's hugs, stuff like that. And, that is a cool thing to be a part of too. But I think it really is the crew that makes it so fun. It's interesting. I had worked with Leah a couple times coming into last season when I first started with Bally Sports North. But even Marnie and I, even being, like pretty prominent women's sports broadcasters here in the Twin Cities, had not had a whole lot of interaction, just didn't cross paths very often. There was really, nothing more to it. And then finally I get to work with her and know her. And of course, everyone knows she's just as fantastic as she is on TV or on the radio. So getting to know that whole crew really well has been fantastic too. But I would say being embedded with this team, with a team broadcast, that's been fun to be a part of again, and a little change of pace from what I'm used to throughout the year.
Mm-hmm. What do you have a preference in what you do? Do you like doing the sideline stuff? Do you prefer maybe doing a little color play-by-play? Do you like having kind of the variety of having different things that kind of changing things up? Do you prefer any aspect to that?
Yeah, I definitely prefer, I really do like the variety quite a bit. I think as versatile as you can be is what's going to benefit you. And that's why, also just generally in my career, that's something I've always really prioritized. I also do volleyball, softball, hockey, football, just to be working year round. Play-by-play is definitely my job. That's my main job. That's what I do throughout the year. But sideline also gives you that different perspective, and it gives you that different perspective. So when I'm in that play-by-play chair and I am working with a sideline reporter, like for the Big Ten tournament, what those interactions are like, those expectations, and having that back and forth. And that's really important to have that entire cohesion with the broadcast. You need to integrate the sideline reporter because they're working just as hard, they're preparing just as hard, but they have to put everything that they've been working on into a 25-second chunk, whereas I have the whole time to just talk however I want. And really, let's be sure here that the reason I do this is just because I like to be talking about the things that I want and the things that I'm interested in. But when you are a sideline reporter, you have to have that restraint and know exactly what this broadcast needs to hear, what the viewers need to hear, that you can work into the conversation that's already happening. And that's maybe the most difficult thing about doing sideline, is that you don't have control over the direction of that conversation. So you may have an idea, you might be ready to go, but the broadcasters in the booth have maybe already kind of gone on to something else. So I think having that perspective, seeing where that fits in, is really helpful for me in my regular job as a play-by-play broadcaster, because coming into last year, I'd actually never done it before. Of course, I'd been a reporter, so interviewing people, being on camera is not new, but in that role specifically has been a really good learning experience. And then also being able to do color too is fun, filling in for Leah B. Olsen, because I get to just kind of just say more about the basketball that I want to say. You prepare in a little bit of a different way. And, it's fun to see like Sloane as the color analyst instead of the like more formal play-by-play broadcaster.
So you kind of mentioned the Bally Sports team well, specifically I'm going to ask about Marnie. Have you rapped with Marnie yet? I know she's into rapping. Have you rapped maybe between commercial breaks? What, have you done any of that
That
yet?
was a brand new skill that she revealed to me and maybe everyone else who was there. But now I guess I'm gonna have to I can't even say up my game, maybe develop a skill because it's non-existent right now. But no, nothing that she would say or do or whatever surprised me, to be quite honest.
How about a halftime performance? When the halftime performance is going on, you and Marnie can just, break out and during a game when you're calling the game together.
You know, if we had some time to prepare, maybe there's a really high bar for those halftime performances that maybe I can be the backup to Marnie.
When it comes to the preparation that you talked about with going into a typical game day, what does that look like from your side of things?
Yeah, I feel like it is I like to compare it to studying for a test, really. That is something that also led me in this direction of my career as well, is that I always enjoyed school and did well in school. And instead of, going on in academia and getting further degrees, that was something I did kind of consider because I always really liked school and learning and gaining knowledge. I instead decided to pick the very low paying path of being a journalist and going that way. But no regrets there about how things have worked out and the skills that I've gained along the way. But it really does come down to studying. I am looking up, local news, past interviews, watching them, reading a lot. A lot of it is just reading, catching up on things. So you have this full picture of both teams that are coming in. Even though this is a team broadcast, this is a Minnesota Lynx broadcast, I'm just as invested in what's going on with the opposing team. So I am watching their recent interviews, reading local news articles about those teams as well. And then it's also just looking at numbers and box scores. And there's so much out there now that makes that a lot easier. Her hoop stats is out there for sure. The WNBA stats site has really stepped things up. But that comes from you. Being able to find these trends, having the knowledge to pick things out, and especially during this time when there is so much knowledge out there, picking out what is important for the listeners to know, because you can be so bogged down, so inundated with however many numbers and getting really deep in the weeds. But what is going to best tell the story about this team in this moment, in this game, in this specific matchup, and having to be selective about that. So those are all things that I, work into my prep. The thing about the WNBA that makes it easy is that maybe this might be a funny thing to other broadcasters, but I'm not usually, unlike other sports like football or hockey for sure, where numbers are the most important thing to having a successful broadcast. For the WNBA, I just know everyone. I know everyone's face. I know everyone's background because I am so inside women's college basketball and have been my entire life. I've been so passionate about this game. So I've watched everyone's careers and I know their story and their backgrounds and what they did as college athletes. So that takes a little bit off my plate when it comes to studying for WNBA games, is that I am never starting from scratch. Maybe I shouldn't say never, maybe a couple of years. If there's a Rebecca Gardner who comes along, you might be like, okay, who's this? This is going back a little ways. But really that helps a lot, is having that institutional knowledge that when you go into it, having that, you're really looking at that specific matchup and making it really topical for that game.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Me personally, I've never dealt with that side of things. I mean, you can prepare as much as you can as when you're covering games, just from a reporter standpoint or a writer standpoint, but it's a whole other world when you're trying to do it live and kind of, you want to be prepared on the fly, which is the toughest thing. So you almost have to over prepare.
That's right. And you try to have as much in your head as possible, so you're not hunting around on your sheet. A lot of people will come up to me and they're like, how do you read this? Like, there's so many words. It's small. It's a little bit different. Marnie is more sparse with her preparation, which it certainly is. Just depends on how you like to look at things and like what visually is going to work for you. But I'm just like, I'm going to have it all down. In case I need it, it's going to be right there for me. So it's just a different process for everyone.
Yeah. It's like when you get a note card during a test, you try and write everything you can on there because you never know what you're gonna have.
I mean, that is the thing. I can't deny that this is technically an open book test.
Yeah.
But I still take it seriously like it's not.
Right, exactly. When it comes to, we talked about your history of being around the Lynx and just kind of covering the game. Do you have a favorite memory so far of when you've covered, this team and, throughout your time covering the Lynx?
Yeah, what's funny is that I might pick something a little bit different. So I've been around the team since 2018. I covered them that season for The Athletic, was then the radio broadcaster, and then moving in to the TV side. But I think the most memorable one I would pick was actually before I had anything to do with the Minnesota Lynx. And that was when I first moved to Minnesota in 2016. It was the end of August, beginning of September. I didn't have a job yet. I didn't know what was going on. I was in a brand new place, 1,500 miles away from where I went to college and where I had been living before. And one of the first things we did, like cardboard boxes still all over our apartment, not even unpacked yet, was go see the Lynx in the 2016 WNBA finals. And I can't remember if it was game 1 or game 2 that we went to, but I just remember walking into that environment at Target Center and thinking, this is the place. This is the place I want to be for an extended period of time. And we're now going on 7 years of living here. And I still feel that sense of appreciation for women's sports, because that's what it was. That was the impression when I had been here just about a week. And that's what I was looking for. People that show up, that support, and who back up that support with their presence. And that was the immediate impression very early on, and a very good impression to have that has definitely withstood the last couple of years. But I would say that was a very memorable thing for me. And then just being able to see that group in person that I had been following for the last several years. So seeing that in person as a fan, not knowing what was to come, and being around the team, that was a pretty special thing.
It's kind of strange, but that's one of my first memories too. Is that 26, or not first memories, but one of my more memorable moments is that 2016 WNBA finals. And I worked for the Lynx in 2007. All right, well, the Wolves and Lynx I started the end of 16 and worked into 2017. So I didn't work with the Lynx or deal with the Lynx until that 2017 season. But when I started with the Timberwolves, during that 2016 season, I ended up going to, right before that, I ended up going to game 5 of the 2016 WNBA finals, which was the infamous NECA game, or I guess you could say the famous NECA game that they ended up winning, obviously on that last second shot, controversial as it may be. That was one of those moments too, that it's like, holy cow. Like I knew that they could pack the Target Center, and Lynx fans were rowdy and loud and fun and supportive, but until you get in that environment, it's unreal. And I still have not, well, maybe with the exception of the 2017 WNBA finals, it was a different venue, but I still have not really experienced anything like that finals since that point. But it's a great introduction. Once you get that, you're hooked. So I hear you.
And that was the thing too, is like that appreciation, because I had grown up going to Sparks games. I grew up in Los Angeles, spent the first 18 years of my life there. So, but after, when I was in college and for several years after, I was living in a place that didn't have a team in Buffalo, New York. So I was so excited to finally get back where there is one. And there was just, okay, this is right. This is how it's supposed to be, where I can go at any single time, whenever I want to. And that was just such a relief to have back in my life again.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you, outside of the team, or I guess not outside, but kind of more specific about the team, do you have any favorite player or, coach or personality or anything like that is kind of sticks out to you? Maybe a couple players that you have enjoyed following and covering over the years?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question, because there are so many. I think it's really well established the kind of players that Cheryl Reeve tends to bring in. And I think the easiest answer, and I don't even mind giving the most obvious answer, it is the greats in Sylvia Fowles and Simone Augustus. Sylvia, because she's such a light of a person. I mean, we heard when her jersey went up in the rafters at Target Center, and throughout her career, her final retirement year, when she got to say goodbye throughout the WNBA, just every great thing said about her is true. It is not hyperbole. It is not people searching for things to say. It is not any kind of just trying to be generous for the sake of her. It is true and it is authentic how great of a person she is. The hugs that she gives can confirm those are the best you will ever have. And then Simone too is someone who would always be a little bit hesitant talking to the media, was never super enthusiastic about it, but always very polite, very easy to work with. But then she would say the most insightful and substantive things. She would be funny as well. And you're just sitting there thinking, I'm listening to the thoughts of future Hall of Famers. And that's a pretty special thing to look at, and who also happen to be really fantastic people as well. I also have to say too, is that I also appreciate Coach Reeve as well. She is someone who I've learned so much from listening to, just having those conversations, and obviously having so much respect for her basketball experience and knowledge, even if it's not about the team, even if it's just some kind of wider question. I'm very interested in her thoughts about things, what she thinks about players, certain matchups, and just her entire experience. Basketball itself, you will learn things from her if you sit in on press conferences. I'm sure you can speak to that too. I feel like there's always something that I'm going to be walking away from. So I feel like we've been pretty lucky with the Lynx, but maybe the easy answer, all the greats here, but certainly those I've been really fortunate to be around, have conversations with, and to listen and learn from.
During that dynasty stretch, it almost seemed like there was a mix of the best personalities. You had Lindsay Whalen, who's a jokester but could be serious. You had, like you said, Simone, who's running away from the PR department when we're trying to get her for media availabilities, and as soon as she gets into the media availability, she's awesome. You have, Rebecca, who's kind of, or I guess you could say Rebecca and Maya, who are a little bit, more quiet and maybe a little reserved, but they were very insightful. Yeah. And then you have Still, who's just like you said, she's just great. She's not a great player, but a great human being. And yeah, that entire group was awesome. And then I also echo what you said about Cheryl. Like, you sit down and every time you listen to her, it's like listening to one of the best basketball minds ever. Like, you could just sit there and listen to her talk. And the thing I like about her too is she's very personable at the same time. She knows everybody that's there. She knows who you are, what you're doing, who you work for. Yeah. I talked to her this offseason and she's like, "Oh, you still living in, the city I live in?" I'm like, "How did you know that?" But that's Cheryl. She knows everything, and that's great. But yeah, it's a fun team to cover. And I think a lot of WNBA teams are like this. The Lynx want, well, I shouldn't say all of them, but a lot of teams, specifically the Lynx, want coverage. They're helpful in providing coverage, and they want to help, they help the media help them, and vice versa. And it's a great relationship to have, and that's something that I think is unique with the WNBA, is that relationship there, and that kind of working relationship that you don't always get with other leagues. So I think that's a great thing to have, and that's only going to help grow the game, which is ultimately what everybody wants.
Yes, it is very much like, I selfishly love to have these conversations. Like, even we will go into the pregame availabilities for opposing coaches at Target Center. And sometimes there might be one person on Zoom. Sometimes there's zero. So sometimes it's just the three of us who get to have basically this one-on-one availability with an opposing coach. And just because this is most recent in my mind too, it's also why I appreciate someone like Stephanie White as well with the Connecticut Sun, because she understands how it works. She is a broadcaster herself as well. So she is extremely, open and great working with the media, because she understands what it's like to be on that side. And I think you're right that can only help in this league, because when you get more of that contact, less of the, more canned answers because it's just a giant group of a media gaggle, or maybe this coach is over it because he's been dealing with this much media coverage throughout his career. It is different because you want that, you want their presence. So I think you can definitely detect that in how teams do respond to media, and we all benefit from it.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of want to transition a little bit into a little bit more basketball talk. We talked a little bit about your first game of the year, subbing in for Leah with doing some color. That was the other night during Pride Night against Connecticut. that game was a little bit of a, I don't want to say step back, but we've kind of been on this roller coaster ride with the Lynx this season, where you ride the lowest of the lows, and then they kind of turn things around for maybe a game or two, and then they kind of go back down in I guess you could say the wrong direction, or below expectations. We're sitting going into the new week. We're at 4-9 right now, or the Lynx are at 4-9, sitting, in one of those bottom four spots in the league, around that 9, 10, 11 mark. What are your thoughts on the Lynx so far? And, look, we weren't expecting, I think you and I can both admit that we weren't expecting the Lynx to have a great season this year. Maybe kind of like what they had last year, but they're still in that transition. They're still in that rebuilding mode. When coming into the season, now that we see the team about a month into the year, is it kind of matching expectations? Or I guess overall, what are your thoughts so far on what we've seen from the Lynx?
Well, it's clear the Lynx have had an opportunity to have a better record. There have been multiple games that have slipped through them. It is clear that they are capable of beating a good chunk of the league. If you look at Atlanta and Los Angeles, clearly they have a very good time against. And coming up, we're going to see them against Seattle and Phoenix in their upcoming schedule. Those are very winnable games as well. But it's clear, and I think this goes for everyone in the WNBA, that there is a very clear line of demarcation. I'm still a little iffy about Washington. I could put them in the top two. Certainly there's arguments that could be made for, Chicago, for example. But to me, it feels like the three teams, which is Las Vegas and Connecticut and New York, and really everybody else. And there's going to be teams fighting for those 4 through 8 seeds. And Minnesota is going to be possibly somewhere in there, possibly outside. But what I think is interesting about this season is that this is even coming from Reeve, the president of basketball operations, where she has taken this long-term approach. And I think her comments are proving that they are not looking at just this season. They are looking at the progress and development for years on out. Reeve has talked about, even as recently as a couple weeks ago, earlier in this month, they're aware of the, in her words, transcendent point guards that could be available in this next year's draft. We don't know the exact plans of Caitlin Clark and Paige Beckers, but we do know how much Reeve values a point guard. That is an extension of her on the floor, a person she has to have that connection and trust in. And that's been difficult to find since Lindsay Whalen retired. Just frankly, she's not found that exact fit that she's looking for. So I think Reeve is looking for that long-term output. And just speaking, personally, I believe in sports overall, no matter what league it is, what sport it is, men's or women's, the toughest spot to be in is that 500 team, that 8 seed, 7 seed. What does that do? You get into the playoffs, you could technically compete for a championship, but are you competing for a championship? And Reeve even said this, and this is verbatim, but this is her words. Sometimes you need to take a step back before you go forward again. She used the example after they got beat by 31 points against the Las Vegas Aces. So again, you're looking at, pretty significant drubbings against the Aces and the Sun recently, showing that, disconnect between that top of the WNBA and many other teams. And she said, look at this franchise. Look what they were when they were San Antonio. And now they have 4 number 1 overall picks on that team. It doesn't take a genius or an analytics department to know that that's a really good formula to have in order to win games and to compete for championships. And that's a team you could very much see go back to back for the first time in the WNBA in 20 years. So for me, I can also see, it's frustrating for fans. There haven't been a lot of wins, especially at home. I know that series against Los Angeles was, a really positive thing, but I think it also is going to really be beneficial to think about that long-term approach as well, because the higher you are in the draft, that is also going to benefit you. We still have not seen what Diamond Miller is capable of, but I've seen her throughout her entire 4 years at Maryland and what she's capable of. And we should all be really excited to see what she's going to do. But also, it's just hearing Reeve talk about more of that long-term approach made me feel like, okay, this is really, I think, where things are leading to with this franchise.
Mm-hmm. I think it would be a little different in, a lot of people kind of forget about the draft lottery and how that works with the 2-year span of kind of keeping those records into account. I mean, one team, you could have, a great year, 1 year, prior, if let's say the Lynx did end up making the playoffs, or let's say they even, they had like, I don't know, let's say they got the fourth, fifth seed last year, and then they have the year like they have this year. They're probably still not going to get a great pick, but the fact that they did have a down year last year, it's I don't want to say that they're trying to lose, because players don't try to lose. They're playing for their livelihood. This is their lives right now. They're trying to play for a spot in the WNBA. But if they do end up, as one of these bottom two teams, that's an okay thing. I think that they'll take that right now with, everything considered of being in that transition period. I think the best case scenario for Minnesota is they're able to, be competitive, develop those pieces that we talked about, those prospects, and also get one of those top picks. That's best case scenario, because then that's when things start to progress. This offseason will be huge with, if they can get a top pick, maybe clear some cap space, maybe go out and grab, some players in free agency or re-sign some players. That's when we're going to start seeing changes made. But yeah, I mean, it's weird to say being bad could be good at the same time, in how it's, it's kind of a win-win situation. Either the Lynx are winning, or they're at the bottom where they're going to end up probably winning in the end. It's a weird spot to be in, but like you said, I understand how it's frustrating for fans, and fans don't want to see it, especially after what they just came out of, what the Lynx just came out of in that stretch over the last decade. It's not easy transition. It's not an easy thing to deal with. But we've seen in the past, every team deals with this, and it's now Minnesota's turn to kind of ride that wave and kind of go through that progress.
And that's why everything you said is exactly right. But I think that's why there is this, kind of understanding of like, when you are just kind of floating around in this, I call it kind of a purgatory of being good to okay. And that's not exactly where you want to be for an extended period of time. Now, there is going to be, other teams that are looking toward the future as well. And that's the thing. I bring up Caitlin Clark and Paige Beckers, but I think there is also really great players coming up as well. You look at Rickea Jackson out of Tennessee, Cameron Brink as well. That is a game changer on defense that you could potentially get with the Stanford forward. So yes, it is about those two. And Reeve has even, made allusions to this as well, saying, when they were talking after that 2018 season, she said this just recently, that we looked at what the next couple of drafts were going to be like, and we felt like this is not quite the time to go that route, just not feeling like there were particular players that they felt at that time were going to be franchise changing. And we know that of course it's still early on. If you look at, 2020, 2021 and 22, or maybe 19 through 21, 21 especially, there have been some hits and misses there for sure in those drafts. But now things are different. I think now we're getting to a point, if you look at this year and next year, those are really ones to get excited about, and finding pieces that all you can really build around, that you can see and envision being those superstars. And that's how you really get back to that point of, yes, we are competing for championships at this point, but it is not easy to be able to build that kind of contender. And that's why I think Reeve was also using that San Antonio, Las Vegas example as well, about how they turned it around and how much they did.
Mm-hmm. You kind of touched on what I kind of wanted to transition to next with the college game. I mean, we talked about it earlier on. You have a good pulse on the college game. You've been around the college game, and the prospects that, you've seen the prospects, you've covered the prospects that are potentially going to be coming out in the draft. How talented do you think, everybody's talked about this draft and, being one of the most talented drafts we've seen in recent history. Now it's weird because we don't know who's going to be in it yet. Yes. I mean, we don't know exactly who's going to be coming out.
We're almost done with the COVID fifth year. Right. I know that seems crazy to say because it wasn't 2020, like 2 years ago, but soon it's going to be a more solid picture. But yes, you're right. We're not exactly sure.
Yeah. And what do you think that, this draft class could look like, and who are, maybe some players that Minnesota could target? I know obviously everybody knows, Paige Beckers and Caitlin Clark, like you mentioned, but let's say they don't come out, it still could be a talented draft. And I guess, who do you think that they might go after? We talked about that point guard. You did mention, Rickea Jackson and some other names before. What do you think that might look like, this upcoming season?
Yeah, it would be, and this is kind of a strange thing too. And this is something that I have not been able to ask Reeve, but something that I have been interested in is maybe what she thinks about, or maybe just around the WNBA, about players who do take that fifth year. I'm thinking of Rickea Jackson, for example, and she did, transfer in her career, but I wonder if on the WNBA side, you want players who want to be there as quickly as possible, who want to compete against the best the first chance that they have. Now, of course, NIL has changed that equation, certainly, but I imagine a lot of these deals and a lot of these brands are going to follow the player for who they are, not necessarily the university they're affiliated with. I'm pretty sure Caitlin Clarkson will be okay in branding herself, whether she's wearing Iowa across her chest or a WNBA team. So it's still early on. I am still interested to see how that plays out in the years to come. But I, of course, did, bring up Cameron Brink, Rickea Jackson, and how could I forget Angel Reese, of course, too. And that's something where her talent, her ability to dominate the glass, I think is something that's going to be very enticing and very transferable to the WNBA because of how feisty, strong, determined she is to get those boards. And she's someone, too, who I have a little bit of insight on because I saw her at Maryland for a couple of years. I was able to hear other coaches talk about her, hear Brenda Fries, the Maryland head coach, talk about her as well. And she has always been that kind of all-out effort player when it comes especially to hitting the glass. And you think about, could she be someone who's able to expand her offensive game as opposed to being that kind of head down, go to the basket at every single opportunity? Can she expand out and really develop that jump shot? But Haley Van Lith, could she be available too? She's someone who I think got her bachelor's degree in 3 years. So she's already off to LSU. She's someone who could be enticing. Maybe as point guard, but maybe as a shooting guard as well. Aaliyah Edwards is another game. I know that there are coaches that are really enamored with JC Sheldon. Again, another plug for Big Ten women's basketball. If you are not watching her at Ohio State, you definitely should be. But I think those are some names. Charisma Osborne is another one who was going to enter this year's draft, decided to go back to UCLA. And of course, I'm not privy to those, decisions, but she's now going to be entering into a much more crowded draft as well. So that'll be an interesting one to watch. So I think all those names that I mentioned show that for next year, potentially, because we don't know who is going to be returning for their extra years, there's a lot of depth there where even if you do pick outside the top two, you feel like you're going to get a quality player. And that's what makes this year and the next one too, I think, especially exciting and compared to the last couple.
Mm-hmm. It could even be, a draft that if you have a, first and a second round pick, you could get two solid players. I mean, it's almost kind of to some extent, like I maybe view it as what the Lynx did with, finding Crystal Dangerfield in the second round. Maybe they end up finding something like that in the second round. Maybe it's not a point guard necessarily, but maybe it is another role player. I think if Caitlin Clark and Paige Beckers, let's say both of them do end up coming out, in this draft, then that obviously makes it a little bit deeper because that pushes everybody else down a little bit. But it's intriguing to think about it. And it's all fluid and it's all up in the air right now. We don't know where their minds are at, what they're thinking. Do you think, and I've talked about this a little bit with some previous guests, do you think that who is atop the board could play a factor in, Paige Beckers or Caitlin Clark coming out? Let's say maybe the Lynx are number one. Do you think that kind of pushes the needle for them to decide to come into the WNBA?
That is a very good question, but also a very hard question to answer. I would want to think, yes, if the Minnesota Lynx, let's just use them as an example. If the Minnesota Lynx are drafted number one, you're thinking, all right, I'm going to come in there. I'm going to be a teammate of Nafisa Collier. I'm going to have, good pieces around, depending on what that roster looks like. But clearly, Fee is, the cornerstone of this franchise right now for good reason and an Olympian. I'm going to go play for the Team USA head coach who has won multiple championships, who wants to win, who can develop this winning team and has done so from that 2010 season into becoming the dynasty that they became through 2017. that maybe sounds like a good place to go, a place where you're going to have those crowds. I know that that's something Caitlin Clark has talked about because she's been open saying, I haven't decided yet, but it is a possibility either way that I return or I come out this year. And something she talked about was the crowds, how exciting it is to play at Carver Hawkeye Arena. And I can speak to that personally, having called, almost a dozen games there throughout her college career. When you're getting 15,000, 12,000 plus to come to your games. And she's even someone when it comes to the road crowds that she draws as well, where she plays into the opposing crowd and she'll put her hand over her ear, like, let me hear it. If we're going up at this point, the Hawkeyes are like, she toys with the crowd. She loves it. She loves the attention, positive or negative as well. And she can take it. So I think finding an environment, which you do have in Minnesota, where you have that fan engagement, that dedication, that is going to be enticing as well. I mean, Paige speaks for herself, right? Being able to play in her hometown, be near her family. But you think about Caitlin too, that being very close to her hometown. She's very close with her family. You think about how many Hawkeye fans would come up and see games. So I think all of those would make it pretty enticing for those at the top if it was potentially Minnesota, to use that as an example. And that's just me putting myself into the shoes of a Gen Z superstar basketball player, of which I am neither of those things. But I would think those kind of circumstances would make it pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would at least play a factor in their decision. I mean, I don't know if Indiana is atop the draft board, or Minnesota. I don't know necessarily how much that will make a difference, but I think it would make a little bit of a difference, just because, like we said, they do have kind of that unique relationship with Minnesota, and obviously Paige being from here, Caitlin, she was just at a Timberwolves game or whatever in the playoffs, like that. She enjoys being here too, and it's intriguing. I mean, I guess if it comes to that, that's a good problem to be in and a good problem to have if you're the Lynx at that point, because you're getting a talented player, whether it's Paige, Caitlin, or somebody else. I mean, that's, even if you have maybe even a top 3 pick, you're still probably in a good spot to get a really talented player. But it's intriguing to think about, and it's also intriguing to think about the other side of things and going back to school, like you said, the NIL deals that a lot of college players have, just having that maybe expanded exposure in the college game, that it seems like the college game does a little bit better of marketing their product a little bit more maybe than the WNBA does. So kind of having that expanded exposure, whether it's TV, March Madness, whatever it may be. But maybe that's intriguing. I don't know. I can't speak to that because I'm sitting here and they're playing basketball. But it's interesting to think about, and I don't know. I've thought of that, throughout this whole process, that potentially that could maybe persuade things or kind of push the needle for if they're on either of those players are on the fence, or both of them. But
yeah, I think that's a really good point, because there are so many different dynamics, and I think we are entering kind of a new era when it comes to women's sports, because we are seeing what those television ratings look like when it is easily accessible to find those games, or when you have those personalities that have been pushed out, or how they've branded themselves on social media. So I think we're still walking into this different frontier, and the players know that. They know the kind of power that they have and bring with them, and how that might transform in the WNBA as well. But you're right, it could be chartered flights, it could be going to class. Like I said earlier, I liked going to class, even though I was excited to graduate at the same time too. But you never know what those circumstances are for each person. And just, you're right that there is really a lot at play here for these current athletes.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see that. I mean, I don't want to get too far ahead of things. We still have over half of the season to play. We're still not done with the WNBA season yet, but it's intriguing to think about the future, because that's all we've talked about with the Lynx, leading up to the year, and even now is that long game that we talked about, and kind of focusing on the future, the now and the future. But
yes,
it's you can't help but just kind of think of what's ahead, and especially when you have a draft class like that, it's intriguing to think about, not only for the top team, but for maybe the top 6 teams in the league. But yeah, it'll be interesting to watch. I think a lot of people are gonna be watching college basketball this year, just to maybe a little bit more than normal, just because of those talented players and all the talent that is in the college game. It's crazy that they're, I don't know, it's great, a great product that they have, and there's a lot of talent spread throughout the country. But and they're all joining forces now. We kind of have the super team era in college basketball, it seems like, but it's fun. But
yeah, that will be interesting to see. LSU, and Anissa Morrow is going to be someone to watch in a couple of years as well, to have those three on the same roster in Baton Rouge. But you're right. I mean, anyone, of course, is welcome on the bandwagon anytime. We know that as women's basketball fans, you want to invite people on, you want to get them to watch. But it is a really special time for women's college basketball because of those personalities, because of the teams. There is really a lot to watch and look forward to. And then, continuing that into the WNBA and really seizing on that. I feel like that's something a reporter or even myself thinks about or asks every time, Kathy Engelbert ends up making an appearance, and we had her on a broadcast a couple of weeks ago, where it's like, so much happened this last season, even for someone like myself who has been following this sport my entire life. That Final Four, that NCAA tournament, felt like there was just a new shift up another gear. And how you seize on that, I think I'll be, very interested to see too, the tangible effects of this couple next draft classes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why we talk about expansion too, is because there's so much talent that has come out and will come out. And, where are they going to go? Like there's just so few spots, and that's why the expansion is so intriguing, and a roster expansion of just creating more opportunities for players. And looking at the year ahead and a couple years ahead, it's like I don't know where everyone's going to fit, but I don't know, it's a good problem to have, because it only increases the talent that or the level of basketball that's on display. So it'll be good, I think. But kind of shifting away, just to kind of wrap things up, shifting away from Target Center where the Lynx play, shifting to another venue in the Twin Cities area. I saw on social media that you went to see one Taylor Swift last night. Is that true?
I did, yes. Seeing her very first show of back-to-back nights at US Bank Stadium. I had never seen a concert at US Bank Stadium. I had never seen Taylor Swift before, but it's been a long journey, Mitchell, because we're the same age. So I feel like I've kind of grown up along with her as well. And what's funny is that I wasn't even really a major fan when I was in high school, when, again, being the same age. And I wasn't an emo or scene kid by any means, but I did listen to a lot of that. It wasn't until later on that you realize, hey, this is an extremely talented person. And being like, okay, this is what I've been missing, which has a lot of factors to it. And it took me too long to like really discover her entire catalog, but it was so fun to just explore everything, to see this huge production, and to see the way she captivates everyone. I mean, you can see the reviews in the Pioneer Press and the Star Tribune, just how much they gushed about that experience, but it was all around fantastic. And you know what, Mitchell, I didn't even have the same problems people did. I got my tickets off StubHub, and so no wanting to throw your computer out the window working with Ticketmaster. So I didn't even have to go through that. But no, it was a fantastic night, and like just sharing this appreciation with a whole lot of other people. 64,000, I think, is what it was.
I saw some pictures. It was absolutely packed, and that's great. I mean, that's what concerts are for, and that's the kind of nostalgic moments that you want to create with people, and that's what I personally love about going to see live concerts. And every time you go to see a live concert, you leave there and you never say, why do we go to that? It's always, I'm glad I went to that. So it's great. That's awesome. But I had to bring that up because it's been a big topic here in Minnesota for if any listeners are outside of Minnesota, they're asking what are we talking about? But everybody inside of Minnesota understands what this weekend was meant for a lot of people. So
yeah, in my former life as a news reporter, I imagined myself this week of going to the press conference to announce Swiftiapolis, and that's the kind of week it's been.
Yeah.
But I still enjoyed it greatly.
I did even see at Starbucks they had Taylor Swift themed drinks. I think it was in the Twin Cities area somewhere. So I don't know how or what that all entailed, but I know that each name had, I think it was maybe a song name to each one of her, one of those drinks. So
people can have fun with that. Yeah.
Yes. It's been interesting here, but it's almost like the Super Bowl coming to Minnesota. So it's been interesting, but that's great. But well, Sloan, that's really all I have for you. I really appreciate you taking some time. Had a great conversation, and I look forward to more coverage from you. Look forward to tuning into Bally Sports North. Everybody else should not only Bally Sports North with WNBA coverage, other coverage, but like you said, Big Ten Network and the college game and everywhere else you are, and on social media. So thank you again for joining, and I appreciate all your coverage and all you do for the Lynx, WNBA, and the game of basketball. So thanks again.
Yeah, appreciate it, Mitchell. Been enjoying the podcast, and thanks again.
Thank you to Sloane for joining me on the podcast this week. Like I said earlier, it's always great to talk to her, to kind of hear her perspective, and to also kind of dive into the broadcast side of things. As I mentioned, I haven't really covered too much of the broadcast side of the game, and so it was great to talk to her. Kind of get some insight, kind of get a behind the scenes look on what all goes into that preparation and what all goes into the job that she has, and as well as broadcasters around the nation. So thank you once again to Sloane. It was great to talk to her, and I look forward to chatting with her on the podcast maybe in the future, but for sure just in general about basketball and things going on around the Lynx. I also want to give a shout out, as we do every week, to Jeremy Rushing for producing this podcast. Does a great job of producing the podcast every week and making everything sound neat and tidy. So thank you, Jeremy. I also want to bring up our Patreon page. That's something that I've been working tirelessly on over the last basically since the WNBA season started, in providing some top-notch coverage that you don't get elsewhere through our Patreon page. If you're able to, please consider at least going to check it out. Maybe starting a 7-day free trial, test it out, see how you like it. If you do like it, and you are able to maybe support with it's less than a cup of coffee each month to support our Patreon page. There's a lot of great perks, including early access, bonus coverage, and other discounts on merchandise. I just released the information about the Hitting the Hardwood store. There's a 25% discount for all of our patrons, and if you are a newsletter subscriber, you can also get 25% off if you go to the Hitting the Hardware store. So go check that out, and there's a lot of great stuff. But like I said, go check out the Patreon page. It's patreon.com/Hitting the Hardwood. Like I said, you'll receive a lot of exclusive perks and much more as part of being a patron and in part of our Patreon community. So more to come with that, and I look forward to providing some exclusive coverage to all of our patrons. I also want to give out a shout out to a few of our partners. One is Homage, one is Better Edge, and one is Playback. We have right now we have a partnership with all three of those areas and three of those companies. I'll start with Homage. Homage, it provides a lot of vintage gear that is really comfortable, really great, and it has great designs. Please go check out Homage. It's HOMAGE.com. You can check out a lot of Lynx stuff, WNBA stuff. You can go check out NBA stuff. You can go check out MLB stuff. You can NFL, whatever you may want to go look into. There's a lot of cool vintage stuff. There's a lot of just logo gear. I have the Lynx blue hoodie. I have the Lynx blue t-shirt. I have the WNBA kind of charcoal color shirt. Love all three of them. I definitely plan on getting more. So go check them out. And if you go check out Hitting the Hardwood on social media, and there are some special links to Homage that if you click on those links, you purchase an item, Hitting the Hardwood will get a percentage of those proceeds. So if you want to go buy something and you want to support Hitting the Hardwood, best of both worlds. So I appreciate you guys going to check them out. When it comes to Better Edge, that's BETTOR edge.com. Better Edge, go check out betteredge.com. That is where you can bet on games with other people. You can bet on games against me. You can bet on slates of WNBA games. Let's say there's 3 games one night. I oftentimes run pick'em leagues that you can join and you can compete against me. Take my money. That's by all means okay with me. If you want to come take my money, that's more often than not I lose. So why not come take my money? So you go do that. Check out if you do go check out betteredge.com/links. Use the promo code when you sign up of Lynx, LYNX. If you do that, you get $20 in free play. So go check that out. At least go check it out for the free play if you want, and just kind of see how you like it. If you don't like it, I highly doubt that you won't like it. But if you don't, whatever. But I guarantee you that you will enjoy it. and you should definitely go check them out. And like I said, come take my money. Lastly, playback. Myself and Jack Borman from Canis Hoopus, we recently started playback, which we do Lynx Live, which is live broadcasts of Lynx games, or we rewatch Lynx games. Throughout each month, we will do around a handful of games. We'll do some live games, though those live games will be away games. We understand a lot of you Lynx fans who are listening, you're at the home games. So we want you to join in on the away games if you're, want to come watch the game live with us. You can hear our commentary, hear our breakdown of the games, and you can also ask questions and just watch with other fans. It's basically you watching the game live as you would on your television, just you're with us. And so please go check that out. We will also do some rewatch games, as I mentioned. So, for instance, let's say the Lynx are playing Connecticut one night. Maybe a couple nights later, they play Connecticut at home. A couple nights later, we'll rewatch that game and break that game down, kind of like watching film. So come check us out. Go check out Lynx Live. That's on Playback. That's playback.tv/Lynx Live. Or you can find it on social media. You can find it on Hitting the Hardwood's Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So go check that out. And also, if you are able to, please subscribe to the Hitting the Hardwood newsletter. That's where I provide really all of the information that you can get in one space, and it's free to sign up weekly. It comes out every week. So go. You can also find that out on social media, Hitting the Hardwood. Follow us on social media, and to get all that information. So, with all of that said, I really appreciate you tuning into another episode this week. I will definitely be back next week again with another episode. I'm really excited about a couple upcoming guests I'm working on to come on to the podcast. A few that are maybe a little bit more of a national focus, but it'll be, they're very tuned into the Lynx, and we'll talk a lot of Lynx basketball in those podcasts as well. So make sure you come back. We'll be back on Tuesday every week, and I will see you all next week. Thank you for listening.
3, 2,